intervention from God, God's glory. Thank you, Father God, in Jesus' name again for that. Thank you, Jesus, and thank you, Holy Spirit, for that grace as well. Another intervention. Next, other events now start happening in this period of time of around age 19 to my young 20s. My first of several visits that I recall from the dead. I had a friend that was killed in a motorcycle accident. And I remember living in the city with another person at that time. I was in the first of several longer-term relationships in my lifetime. I was going into the washroom late at night, like 1 or 2 in the morning or something like that. And the dead person appeared in the washroom, like standing in full in front of me, talking to me as well, like basically. But I didn't try to touch him or anything, as I knew he had died. And I knew he was buried already. We had gone to his funeral. But it looked exactly like him, and he had a message for me. And the message was, because the person I was living with, he was also extremely close friends with. And he said to me to be sure that I take care of this person. Take care of that other person. Don't treat that person wrong or anything like that. Just take care of them. And I remember not being afraid, not worrying about it. And I just got this nonchalant attitude of, yeah, like, okay, sure, of course I'm going to take care of him. He's my friend too, right? And I'm like talking to this ghost, and I'm like, yeah, of course. My friend too. I care about my friend too. Of course I'm going to take care of him. And it was like that was the end of it. And so the ghost just left after that. The ghost, I don't remember if he was moving his lips, but I remember the voice sounded like the person as well. And I don't remember if it was just words coming to my mind from the ghost or if the ghost actually moved his mouth and spoke. But either way, it was his voice, and it was a ghost, head to toe. He wasn't very see-through either, you know what I mean? Like we see on television. It was like a person there, but not rock hard. Like I don't know how to explain it, because I knew it was a ghost. I knew it was a ghost because I knew he was dead. So it was just really weird. I remember thinking, actually, that I really didn't think anything of that. I just walked out of the bathroom, not really thinking much about it, just like, okay. And, thinking back now, there was zero fear. No fear whatsoever from me, because I remember thinking people do come back from the dead and visit and communicate. And so to me, I thought that was normal, seeing as how, my mother, she also believed in ghosts and reincarnation and the whole New Age scene as well, basically. So there came more experiences of more ghosts after this. Up to age 25 approximately, I was now living in a different house in the city. Now this is where things are a bit cloudy, but I believe it was a dream first that came to me. It was a dream about dying in the basement laundry room of the home I was living in there. And my body was laying on the floor. And I don't know how I died, but my body was laying on the floor, and I remember rising above my body, looking down at my body. That was my dream, but they call those out-of-body experiences. Another thing that happened in that same home, in the basement, was a visit from another ghost. This was a girl, a little girl. I was in the basement in the rec room area, a finished rec room area with a couch and so on. And I remember being alone in the basement and actually seeing a little girl, longish, blondish hair, in a dress, maybe about 10 years old. And she was just kind of out and about and around the couch area. She didn't speak to me, though, that I remember. She just disappeared after that, and I seem to think she showed up one more time in that basement, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think she did. It's foggy if she came 2 times or 1 time for sure. But when I left that home and moved out of that home, I never saw that little ghost girl again in any vision or apparition or anything. So I believe that little girl and out-of-body experience in that same home was tied to that home, tied to that basement, because I never saw her on the main floor of the house. And nothing strange happened on the main floor. It was in the basement. So something that was in that home stayed in that home, probably still there to this day, I don't know. So then moving forward came some more years of the bar circuit and party scenes. Another shorter relationship with someone I recognize now would have needed deliverance if I had known what I know now. That person would have needed deliverance back in those days. I recall I always had nasty dreams of things like dogs with legs cut off, bleeding and stuff, being dragged on the ground. I never had good dreams at that time. I remember one dream really frightening me, and I was dreaming of a huge lion, and I was dead asleep, and a big lion came right in front of me and roared. And it was like this audible roar right in front of my face, and it freaked me out. I was sleeping overnight at my auntie's place, my cousin's place. This is that same cousin where all those events happened with the drowning and the truck hood. And so I remember jumping out of the bed and running into the living room and sitting in the reclining chair at my auntie's place because this lion woke me up, and I was like all freaked out. Anyways, I had several long-term relationships where my significant other was either a heavy drinker and had access to a lot of money, but drinking would be more important than me. Another one in my lifetime, a different relationship person, again, had money, but they were obsessed with money, had a lot of oppression with issues from being victimized. One of these people was even involved in Freemasonry. I learned a bit later on. Continuing on now, going up to my younger 30s and years, I learned I am pregnant, my first and only child. And my longest relationship, his father, living common law, a son now comes. And with that, ongoing demonic attacks from everywhere, ongoing for us both, until Jesus came to save me about 23 years later. While pregnant twice, I was approached by a family member, insinuating abortion is best, and here is the money. Go get an abortion, that's all you have to do. Say yes and take the money. I refused both times. Baby finally arrived, and he was born absolutely perfect, but with the cord around his neck, and he lost some oxygen during birth. And I wondered about that, if that would affect him when he got older, but I don't believe it did. I know that up until he was 18 months old, he really never slept through the night, not once. He was very skittish of any loud noises. But what a joy this baby was to me. An absolute delightful gift from God. For me, that's what he was. Someone to love me. I recall thinking that, oh boy, and I doted over him, and I loved him to pieces. His health status, coupled with my own health status while he was growing up, ended up taking huge tolls on both him and I. It took us to really very dark places some people never experience in their lifetimes. He knows those places, and so do I. And I'm hoping one day he can do his own testimony for Jesus, because there won't be a dry eye in the house if he can. He experienced that fourth or more generation of what I was born into. For sure, I can count back that I was the third or more generation, but I can count back 3, and then we lose track of people. So it could have been more. So if you recall, my mother was a diviner, her mother was a diviner, and then that information cut off. My son, he never asked for this stuff. One day he told me, we were driving in the car, and basically he was like in tears, and he was being very honest and very forthright. And he said, Mom, I never asked to be like this. That was a severe, sobering truth moment. As a mom, you just know in your heart that that is the truth. He didn't ask to be like that. He never asked for anything he was going through. And as a mom, I was desperately trying every method to get him help and healed, just like all moms do when the doctors, they just don't have the answers and there's no help. I never had him, his father and I never had him baptized as a baby either, not being regular churchgoers. Although he is fire baptized with the Holy Spirit, he is faith baptized now, over 20 years later. His birth and both of our health challenges now brought forth a 2-decade hunt for health, over 20 years. And it was because of this health hunt that the doctors couldn't resolve, neither for him or myself, both. And basically, we were not turned to God, born again baptized at that time for this help. So instead, it became like, well, if Western medicine doesn't work, then we go alternative natural. And it felt at the time like there was just no other option. My mind didn't see any other option. So aside from my own medical issues, there was his issues. So starting at, from being born, not sleeping through the night as a newborn, babies usually sleep, but not this one. He was up every night keeping his mom up until he was 18 months old before he slept through the night for the very first time. So him and I sat up every night watching Jerry Springer at 3 a.m. on television in the living room. I remember that. We were used to doing that. He was startled easily if he napped in the daytime by noises. So I believe going forward it was his 18-month regular doctor visit shot, the jab that they give at that age. I recall going to the doctor office with him and a bunch of other moms are with their babies. They're getting their regular routine scheduled shots updated. And they all look like, they're doing fine, the babies and the moms. And I think the one he was going for was his mumps and measles one, scheduled to give at 18 months old in Canada. I can't quite remember. But after receiving that at the doctor's office, and going home, within 4 hours, he seizured. I was panicked. I was scared. I was heartsick. This is my beautiful new baby boy, and his eyes are rolling in the back of his head, and I'm worried. I'm a first-time mom with a medical emergency here. I'm floored, and I'm angry because this is only 4 hours after the doctor, and I knew that the only thing that he had been introduced to was whatever they injected in him. And my perfect baby was affected by this event, and I knew that in my heart. And so I called the pediatrician office and was told there's no way he could seizure from that, and we were brushed off. I ended up taking care of him myself at home. I was feeling abandoned. I was thinking, well, if the doctor doesn't believe me and their office discredited my concerns, then the hospital wouldn't believe me either. So I felt really abandoned. I felt I was left alone. He was the only real, true, pure joy I ever had in my whole life. My brand new baby boy, So, and he was extra special to me because medically I never thought I was able to even have a baby. And then here he comes by surprise. So he was a gift from God. Like, I view this as so special. Someone I could pour my love into and someone that could love me back as well. Being a first-time mother, too, with no child experience. I just tried natural things, optimal diet, keeping him healthy. The next time he was due for his next scheduled set of shots, we refused and stopped all shots. One seizure like that, seriously, is enough to scare any mom off for good on that subject. When you see what appears as a healthy baby on the outside, and you watch his eyes go rolling in his head, and there's something seriously wrong, something's not right. And as a parent, we know we're being fed a lie when we see that. Then came a time after that he needed to go see the pediatrician again This time we made an appointment to go to the office, and the doctor says, unless we agree to update his shots, the doctor will not agree to finish the appointment for the other issue he was brought in for. Can you imagine that? He will not treat him or go any further unless he got jabbed first. We left being refused medical treatment because of that. And again, as parents of, our first child, we were on our own. I would picture him growing up like 10 years old, and we could walk down the sidewalk holding hands and me protecting him, things like that. I truly loved him with all I had. And so enter school age and other medical issues pop up, a surgery for a certain type of hernial correction, along with other things. The youngest ever seen at his age, the doctor said, but it was repaired. And he was put in private school also to start school in kindergarten. We thought as parents it would be better than public school, and worked extra bingos they even had in their hall to help pay this tuition. And it had the name Christ in the name of the school. And so immediately because of that, I thought, oh, well, it must be a godly, good school, right? Oh, boy. Well, it turns out it was a Roman Catholic school, and him and the teachers clashed immediately, pretty much, and never got along. They complained about him constantly, not conforming like the other children. And he said he was being mistreated, along with some other suspicious stuff. So we moved him out of that school and put him into a public school. Strange things started to be reported off and on by staff in public school. I didn't believe them, and so they started really pushing an educational assistant be needed for him. We went along with things on that because where else would he go to school then? We were both working and needed to pay the mortgage, the bills, food. We had no idea how to homeschool and needed to work to bring in the income, even meet the bills, never mind anything extra. Fast forward to school complaints up until teens, all about his behavior. Then for a while, full allergies and full-blown Tourette's appeared, and with bioresonance treatment, it seemed to dissipate over time. He was an extremely intelligent child. By the time he was 5 years old, he could read the newspaper word for word. I could never understand why the schools would not recognize his intelligence and instead would complain about his behavior. In his teenage years came normal troubles for a family like mine, but now something's not so ordinary. So not so ordinary is for your child to wake up very, very afraid, and to be describing like something had been jumping on your child's chest when he was sleeping. Other issues that most parents never see in their lifetimes or hear about. Doctors, they contribute things like this when they're young to ADD, but they were wrong. I learned this much later. As a Christian, they were wrong. There was events that would happen that would raise the hair on your arms, he would speak about. And to another, it could seem like it was just he had seen a Hollywood movie or, watched or played some kind of game on Xbox, and he had a big imagination. But I can tell you this was not the case. These are not nice things. When an unclean spirit comes to bother your family or your generations, these are not nice things. They are mean. They can be scary to the person, not knowing what is going on. Things can happen to them in the supernatural realm, and having zero help with this. What happens? Exactly what happened to us. Things escalate over the years out of control to the point of even hospital visits, being beaten, under attack, physically harmed, many hospital occurrences, drug use to block the supernatural barrage coming to the mind and to the life, crime, Crime gets involved in order to support drugs. It's one thing that leads to the other, down the snake pit. All these things start taking footholds, strongholds. Now, this is always coupled with the rejection for family support. Any family support asked for from others on all occasions, and a barrage of issues in the whole extended family was just not there. There was no support. Everyone during those times ended up saying it was someone else's fault, and that I knew otherwise. I knew that, children needed love. This was not a result of overspoiling a child. This was not a result of a child with a lack of love. No one can ever convince me that a child waking up wild-eyed and gasping because something was jumping on his chest in his sleep, or other things in the night causing sleep paralysis, there's no way you're going to convince me this is a spoiled child effect. You can take that and throw that in the garbage. Anybody who's telling a parent that, throw it in the garbage and take what I am saying very seriously about unclean spirits. It used to make me very angry when people would point their fingers at me and not take the time to really learn and see what was truly happening. I was looking for someone that could identify something that could help us, because I knew it wasn't normal. This was not just a you spoiled him, or you just want to do things your way, have it your way, or something like that. Dead end family help, the road to nowhere. Seriously, take the time, people. Anybody listening, take the time to pray for my son, please. For Jesus to heal him completely and release him completely from any bondage, and to have a clear path in love with Jesus, steadfast, permanent love and truth, bound to him and written on his heart for the rest of his days on earth. And to be able to share his own personal testimony one day in the Lord's fullest glory. Because it would be a testimony that many people would want to hear. And people would gain hope from if the Lord grants this. I already know from my own experiences with autoimmune that there was nothing doctors knew about that for me would help me. So now I felt we were under the gun. We were being forced to go down alternative therapies path unless we accepted the doctor's injection at that age, again, when we needed help for him. And in accepting that injection would cause more seizures. That's how I felt personally. And there was no choice. This was a no-brainer. It was no way. So I chose alternative as the main road to go next. What other choice did I have in not knowing about Jesus's casting the demons out, healing the sick, and raising the dead? There's nothing else left but alternative therapies. I'm going to say the truth about when he was born. I also had hair mineral analysis tests done on all of us, mom, dad, and baby. And this is where you cut pieces of hair off. A naturopath or an osteopath usually does this kind of work. And you send it in an envelope off to a lab for processing your mineral levels and things like that. They take from the hair. It's a long-term picture of your hair levels, your mineral levels and status of the hair, apparently. Anyways, the results that came back to me were horrific, because the results of my hair results were terrible. They were terrible. I expected them to be terrible, out of whack. But I did not expect a baby's hair to be identical, almost identical to my own levels. I thought babies were born perfect. These results came back in bar charts, colored bar charts. And if I held them up against each other, they were almost identical. Not exact, but very close. So I was showing very unbalanced levels, according to the chart reports, due to the autoimmune conditions. Seeing his, though, the babies, That freaked me out. Fear set in and the hunt began to correct imbalances in my new baby, because I always thought all babies were born brand new, as in perfect cells with nothing wrong with them. This was an eye-opener to me, that he was following in my path of medical, and I am seeing in front of my eyes on the bar charts. We were almost identical in bar charts. And the father, his chart was far different, very different. And I didn't want this for my child. I wanted him to have the best in his health and his life. So after the comparison of these hair analysis results, I quickly came to realize that this is going to involve cash now. I'm going to need cash to pay for our health. I had to learn and work in two main fields of employment. One was health fields and the other technology. I started with a school loan and took some computer tech school. I would even have my little guy in the baby stroller in my classroom. I think I have an old photo of that one time. And I was always interested in healing, but my love was in natural healing, using, good foods. I loved herbal poultices and old-fashioned remedies that worked hundreds of years ago. I started after tech school also then taking alternative therapy courses of many, many kinds over the next 20 years, and I ended up with many certifications in both of these fields. I ended up purchasing various healing modalities in the alternative fields over the years. The first largest investment for me was a bioresonance machine, bioresonance therapies. This unit involved a wand that would circle around, and it could check chakras, etc., and anything you can name in the body. I had no idea this would be considered New Age until just more recently. The first time I heard God's voice was around 14 years ago. I was around 45 years old, and I had begun a business on a main thoroughfare. I named it Shelley's House of Modern Reflex Therapies. It was a business office setting offering reflex therapy, reflexology, ear candling, and natural therapies. I added at that time to offer the bioresonance services as well. And a man came that had a very bad allergic reaction to something, seeking extra relief if possible, any extra help. While the man was sitting through his session, I heard my first spoken words from God ever in my lifetime. There was no mistake in my mind. This had to be from God. This was a brand new experience, unlike the other ghost visits and things like that. It took me completely off guard and completely by surprise. I did not hear this voice again until about 2 years ago. So there was a break of about 12 years before the next time God spoke to me. So what happened was a loud voice that was coming from outside of my head, like as if it was coming from the ceiling, directed from the ceiling downward, loud, very audible, calm, and just matter of fact. Unmistakably a male voice, and he spoke very matter-of-factly, and you get the feeling, I got the feeling of authority, all-knowing. And he said, "You just met your future husband." And that was it. I was stunned. I knew no one else was in the room, and I was like, what just happened? And I realized that the man sitting there that he spoke about did not hear this voice, and only I heard it. So I recall thinking, well, this is special. God came to tell me who my husband would be. I was amazed and grateful to see how this was going to turn out. So this man and I did end up together for a long time. And I feel it was the Lord directing this, having me there for a healing that he eventually went through, and some spiritual understanding. There were some obstacles and a physical breakdown of some organs, and I recall I asked God to heal him, and I would use all these natural therapies for him, and he actually had a double organ transplant surgery scheduled. Organs were very low on function. One was 5%, one was 10%. And I don't want to give too much personal details, but they were in low numbers. But it was about 2 years into applying these different natural therapies and, the other things that he actually healed without operation or surgery, and had x-rays from his doctor to prove the same. He was healed. I know this was God's glory now, and this was a gift for him from God, and perhaps maybe even the reason that we were actually together for a long time. We could have been legally married, but I actually didn't agree with the terms drawn up with that. We talked about it. I don't know. I was born with a white picket fence idea, one could say. And I don't know. It bothered me if, one person didn't want to, how can I say this? One person didn't want to put in as much as I wanted to put in. We'll just leave it at that, because I didn't really have anything to put in. Let's just leave it at that. Anyways, we parted ways amicably. From year 2016 to 2019, I mentioned this time period here because it involved a weight loss venture and some authoring. I wrote a small book. I was guarded to use my middle name for public use and not my first name, so I used a pen name. This actually was used against me later on by the demonic spirits in various ways I can explain later. It's in regards to using my middle name, Catherine. And when I had been using the name Cosmic Catherine on my website, for the divination website, and I was just calling myself Cosmic Catherine on that. There's other Cosmic Catherines out there, by the way, on the internet, but mine was particularly for that website. And so anyways, this was very quickly followed up with October 2020 time frame now. This is when the U.S. ballot counting issues began following suit, with times unprecedented like we have never seen before, leading to worldwide felt disputes and calamity that really started to separate people's belief systems, it seemed, over the next few years. And so during these times of trial and error for health issue resolutions, came in that thinking, well, what about other machines? Because this is the snake pit. When nothing is working for healing and there is no real resolve, then you figure, well, your device or your therapy must have something wrong with it. And you think, well, I guess I need more knowledge, or I might need more training, or maybe it's something else you need. And so off one goes on the hunt for more. So I recall thinking about the old days. I would ponder a lot about the old days. What about the vintage machines? What about those machines labeled quack therapy devices or old medical discoveries? Were there maybe some to try still? That stuff always fascinated me, and I was very curious. I loved collecting old remedy books and things like that, vintage books. So slowly things expanded next to many types of machines, which almost became like a hobby, collecting them and figuring out how to use them over the years. I recall starting with basic frequency machines after the bioresonance, like Hulda Clark bug zappers, various types of Rife machines. There's various kinds. There was thump and tap therapies involving listening in the body. Those were by Ruth Drown, who learned from another doctor an American chiropractor in 1891 to 1965 who developed that pioneer work of Albert Abrams in 1863 to 1924 in electronics, and later on that was known as radionics. And eventually Ruth got into Homa Vibra ray units and drown radio vision and drown radiotherapy, leading to radionics works herself. Methods in radionics had a principle in obtaining a number that seemed to start with tap thump. But then it turned into dowsing over the years to obtain a number for a dial to turn the dial to. And so also my mom, she loved old healing things and was into Edgar Cayce and his remedies, seeing hypnotists, tea leaf readers, seeing psychic shows like Sylvia Brown and such things. I even went to her show one time with my mother, a Sylvia Brown show, where I tried John of God's from Brazil, John of God's remedy sent from Brazil. If anybody's seen or heard about John of God, he was quite infamous for his healing, doing surgeries without instruments, and people were getting healed, and he ended up in jail. And so I ended up hearing about this John of God fella from another family member, and everybody sent their photos to the facility under instruction that they had on the John of God website. Anyways, we were sent back pills we were supposed to take, and when the bottles were emptied, we were supposed to bury the containers. Shaman healers were consulted. I remember seeing angelic psychics, anything for alternative remedies, including seeing naturopaths, training. I even trained under a naturopath for several years as well. And I learned reflex therapy machines, massage therapy. I learned ear candling and EMT, electromagnetic machines, research-based radionic machines. I got into wishing machines and paper psychotronics and sigils creations. Not just using a sigil, but I learned how to make sigils. Color therapies, I got into that with many, and then combined them with many of the units I had learned to use. And I also learned how to use a host of specimens on the plates, which would be seen as altars actually of these machines. They had various different kinds of altars you could hook up. So the plates, the blood would go on there. I could get a sample of blood, urine, saliva, hair, even a person's photo, a fingerprint, say on a piece of tape, would even pick up a reading. And what I now realize today that I didn't know then is that these actually were altars on machines where you had to put any type of object or human sample to test it or run it. The testing or the running always involved, it had to involve some kind of a dowsing to obtain numbers. There was also non-machine radionic rings and pyramids. These were energy charged, and you would buy them energy charged, and the metals were arranged in certain orders in order to produce stronger frequencies that just emanated on their own from them. I got into psychotronic diagrams where you could put samples in the middle of. These are on paper. I recall even ordering ones from a wizard one time, a type of diagram, and lots of what I collected in this was regards for protection and healing, supposedly. I also had used cupping cups, acupuncture. I had my own set of cupping cups, acupuncture without needles instruction, and even learned about urine therapy. I think I exhausted pretty much most avenues of treatments, and still no cure for myself or my son's issues that I had been seeking. Even with all of this going on, it ran me absolutely thousands of dollars, almost all the money I made in my whole lifetime. And anything extra was always going into a new therapy or a new piece of equipment or a new book to learn it. Everything was training, health, and working. And it all in hindsight now, it was a complete waste of my time and my money. And even with all these, what I thought were top of the line therapies and services that I was offering, my mother still died from cancer. And these things did not save her. I believe in my heart nowadays that all of this was actually building up to a cause and purpose to fulfill for other people in the future, which is this whole testimony. Towards the end of this new age stage in my life, this was shortly before Jesus came and visited me, I gained a massive collection of many of these various machines and technologies. My whole home was basically filled, every room pretty much, with something. Either crystals that were energized and charged, or sitting on wishing machines, or being used through radionics, or running samples on wishing machines, electromagnetic machines. And this even expanded further on top of this to taking more alternative therapy courses, which were new age courses. A master's in Reiki. I ended up with my master's in Reiki. A new Brazilian emotion code therapy program that involved dowsing. I graduated a course in Akashic record reading services. And there could be more that I'm just not recalling right now, but that was the bulk of it I recall at that time. I had books and books of acupuncture, how to read palm lines on hands. I had a collection of tarot cards. I had about 7 or 8 different decks of tarot cards. And I remember I took some lessons in tarot card reading online on Facebook and Facebook groups and things like that. I had collections of crystals and stones and sands that were energized, or I would energize them, or I would purchase them already energized, and I could energize them with the machines that I had. By this time, I believe it was around December 11th, 2021, when I had now expanded even more, and I started a new website now, and it was an online cosmic new age medical intuitive dowsing business. And I ran this until approximately January the 9th of 2022, and ended up deleting it all, which was a big step for me, because I was so used to all these years of trying to fight medical issues and our God-given DNA being disrupted, which I felt so strongly about, and fighting all of this with all these other methods. I recall just sitting in front of the computer and hitting delete to whole profiles on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and whatever else I had created. The whole Wix website I ran of divination dowsing, the business website I was working, I just shut it down, shut everything down I could. And there was a lot. It wasn't just one click and I could start fresh with a clean slate, because I had been sort of everywhere promoting things for that business. Anyways, that website had been called CosmicHealthRescue108.com. And that I just hit delete on, which I did. Plus, I basically had a lifetime accumulation of the machines, as I said, books and things I had collected, used over the years. I recall really trying to buckle down and do or redo things in accordance with truth and the teachings of Jesus. And there was just so much to go through. It seemed pretty much impossible, just mountainous